the administration filed an appeal this morning with the Ninth Circuit. I would note the administration won an identical case in the Ninth Circuit just a few months ago with respect to the federalizing of the California National Guard. Under Title 10 of the U.S. Code, the president has plenary authority.
Stephen? Stephen? Hey, Stephen, can you hear me? It seemed, Stephen, I apologize. It seems like we're having a technical.
That there is the first time you've ever heard Stephen Miller shut the f up while he's saying something, but he froze and made me wondered, is this a Mitch McConnell moment? Is this an elderly moment when this guy's only, 39 years old? Did he freeze up and did his brain break? Actually, what happened was, as you guys heard right before he froze, Stephen Miller accidentally said something even his loose-lipped, loudmouth, racist ass probably shouldn't have said. And someone in his ear said, "Stephen, shut the f up." He said the president has plenary authority. You guys know what that is? Plenary powers refer to the full, complete authority granted to a governing body, allowing it to legislate on any matter within its jurisdiction without limitations. There's bases behind something like that. Here it is. These powers are crucial in the context of state governments, as they enable states to exercise broad legislative control and govern effectively within their own territories, reflecting the principle of federalism that delineates state and federal responsibilities. But Stephen Miller said Donald Trump has plenary authority to do what he wants. And this is when he's talking about him sending armed military into American cities that he already said should be used as training grounds to kill American citizens so that, the rest of his authoritarian regime can take over this country. In case you were wondering, since we saw that these things do exist in some aspects, I also looked up whether or not the president of the United States has plenary authority, like Stephen Miller said before he got shushed. By the way, no, the president does not have those powers, as those powers are held in absolute and unlimited terms. So we know why Stephen Miller said it, because that's how he thinks. The president's powers are explicitly defined by the Constitution and are subject to limitations and checks by other branches of government, including congressional authorization, the Senate's advice and consent, and also judicial review. All those things that this administration has been running over, like with tanks, but really fast. Because as we saw, the anchor there on CNN was confused as to what was going on. That whole time, Stephen Miller's sitting there frozen, not knowing what to say. There's a pit in his stomach. He's like, damn it, did I just give up the whole game? By the way, they've been giving up the whole game for a long time. It's just a matter of whether or not they say the very loudest part of it that they're supposed to keep inside their brains and as a part of the rest of their plans before people go, wait a second, plenary authority, is that what he said? So there's a couple folks that watched this whole thing live, and I wondered how they came back around to it, or what is it they gave as the reason behind it, or if he continued just talking. This one poster over on Threads said, it is real, because people wondered if this is some kind of AI. They said, I watched it live. They cut the commercial, came back, and continued the interview citing, quote, technical issues. But it's clear Miller showed his cards with that plenary authority, and someone told him to shut his trap. Someone else responded to that also and pointed out that CNN posted that interview minus this bombshell over on YouTube, like it never happened. So I looked into that. I did notice. So CNN, I went up on their page, and what they then posted was, I saw the time point of when he froze up and was told to shut up. The point that they played of that entire interview was like 10 and a half minutes, was from a couple minutes after that. So maybe they took that break, came back, restarted the rest of that interview, and continued on through and never posted that original part. It's got to be up somewhere, but officially with that, liberal rag of CNN, as MAGA would call it, they don't seem to really want to show that part. Again, it's 2025, so everybody can find it. It's really easy to get to. In fact, it's making its rounds. But for some reason, why is it that CNN, who discovered this guy who has a great power and has not been elected to have the level of power that he's got to be telling Donald Trump the ways that he can initiate his fascist takeover, it's like almost like a bit of a cover for him. So this is who Stephen Miller is. He's been talking about how they're crossing all kinds of the levers of power for a while. This is what he was saying about insurrectionist judges.
You called a legal ruling legal insurrection. Are you recommending the president take action against judges whose rulings he disagrees with?
No, it's simply a factually accurate statement that when a judge assumes for him or herself the powers that have been relegated or delegated by the Constitution to the president, that is a form of a legal insurrection. And we have seen...
Insurrection carries legal weight, so are you recommending...
We have seen over the last 9 months a ongoing legal insurrection in which district court judges, as a class in many cases, have issued, which is why they've been overturned so much, have issued rulings that are flagrantly unlawful and unconstitutional. And it is an insurrection against the laws and Constitution of the United States. And we need to have district courts in this country that see themselves as being under the laws and Constitution and not being able to take for themselves powers that are reserved solely for the president.
Legal insurrection. Somehow they have to be under the Constitution, and Donald Trump and his ass don't have to be. What he sees as the Constitution is something that he can wave around and use for his own purposes and directly lie about, while then he says this judicial branch needs to stop, interpreting the law and then implementing and coming down with rulings that we don't like. That's what his problem is. As a matter of fact, this is what he posted. I read this yesterday, but I want to show you guys just how this drumbeat of propaganda works. He says, the issue before us now is very simple and clear. There's a large and growing movement of left-wing terrorism in this country. It's well organized and funded, and it's shielded by far-left Democrat judges, prosecutors, and attorneys general. The only remedy is to use legitimate state power to dismantle terrorism and terror networks. So I'm bringing all that back to point out there's this, I was going to call it a hodgepodge. No, but it's a very detailed approach to how they're coming from this angle of calling their political opponents terrorists, including judges that rule any kind of way that they don't like being ruled, and just calling that outside the bounds of their judicial purview to do those things. Well, at the same time, you call them terrorists, that means that you can then and push this authority over them where you can jail them, murder them, disappear them. So as long as you just create some other enemy that's doing things that they're not doing, and anybody who rules against those actions that you have, that they're assisting in the terrorism, along with his declaration of plenary powers that this president has to do anything he wants, the laws are gone. He controls the laws. He's above the law, and he can do what he wants, and he can create new illegal activities, what he deems illegal activities for his political enemies. After, Stephen Miller glitched and got back on CNN afterwards and got a chance to consult with the people in his ear that were telling him to be quiet about exposing the rest of the game, the last 1% of the game, because they're telling us everything else anyway. He then actually had to talk about just directly, specifically, the reasons why he accidentally said Trump has plenary powers and authority to go and start unleashing military into the streets. Here are his thoughts about Portland.
You make the claim of terrorist assaults and violence attack over 100 nights, and yet the judge overseeing this case says that that's untethered from reality. And local officials on the ground say that Trump's assertion of what's happening is in Portland, that it's war-ravaged and burning to the ground, is far from true. I looked at the police data, and police have made something like 70 total arrests since June. And there are no reports of buildings being burned to the ground. The White House cited a guillotine being rolled out as like a public display of rebellion. But there isn't actually a threat that these demonstrators are going to overthrow the government. Are you concerned that that response weakens your legal argument?
No, they are actually, as we speak, trying to overthrow the core law enforcement function of the federal government. Boris, this is, I think, where we're talking past each other. When ICE officers have to street battle against Antifa, hand-to-hand combat every night to come and go from their building, when they try to exit in a vehicle, when they are swarmed and surrounded and they try to tip the vehicle over, when people bring weapons to an ICE facility to try to engage in direct violent assault against ICE officers, what is the purpose? It is to prevent Immigration and Customs Enforcement from carrying out the mission the American people elected them to do. Their objective is to make it impossible for ICE to carry out ICE enforcement.
I don't remember ICE officials being elected, as he just said there. The American people elected ICE officials to go and attack American citizens, and then apparently take part in hand-to-hand combat every night with these rabid, bloodthirsty people with signs and bullhorns and rainbow umbrellas. Can't believe it. Can you understand how tough it is? Once he ramps up into his whine, octaves and starts talking about, and once it starts getting there, the lies are increasing, and he's trying to have some kind of, I guess, aggressive a voice or some kind of like oratory skills where he thinks he's inspiring his fellow fascists to rise up with him and get scared of the things that he's telling them to be afraid of. So in talking about that complete and utter lie about hand-to-hand combat every night, they're being attacked, people are jumping on them, they're fearful for their lives. Somehow he thinks this weaving is supposed to work in their favor. But as long as you listen, it doesn't make any sense.
I don't know of many Democratic politicians who have endorsed these terrible incidences that you just referred to. And I also don't know of any evidence that there's some kind of vast underlying organization funding them. Is that what you're indicating is happening here?
Yes, in fact, we know that it's true. But obviously...
You think Tyler Robinson was being funded by some terrorist organization?
No, what I said was that you asked whether there was some larger criminal conspiracy relating to domestic terrorism in this country. And I said, yes, there absolutely is. Now, of course, Antifa has been designated as a domestic terrorist organization. This is only one example of many in which we have, it's typically a continuum of violence. It involves both organized doxing, it involves violent threats and intimidation, it involves explicit calls to commit violence against a targeted person. And then that tends to escalate into physically violent and obstructive acts.
By the way, the source that he cited to talk about how Democrats are the ones that are funding whatever kinds of attacks that they're making up is just believe me, that was his sourcing.